There are a ton of questions that you can ask in a way that's conversational.
April Palmer is a sales strategist, educator, and recovering overachiever who helps fast-growing companies make smarter business and technology decisions without the panic spiral.
I look for opportunities to tell them no to something, or to say, this maybe isn't the right fit for you if this, and this.
She mixes sharp negotiation strategy with design thinking, storytelling, and just the right amount of chaos to make complex topics actually fun to learn. And in today's episode, we do exactly that. She shares insights on how to sell by building connections without sounding salesy, what words to never use in your sales calls, how and what questions to ask in order to make the experience joyful for both you and the person you're trying to help, and many other insights so the negotiation process is not a burden for you.
There's a difference between being genuinely curious about what is going on with people and having a set of questions that you need to build an ROI business case. That's not curiosity, that's process.
If there is a way to make business more human, more honest, and infinitely more fun, you can bet that April is already on it.
There's a statistic that says that people who allow the person on the other side to speak 80% of the time, the people who are speaking think that the person who is not speaking, who should be the salesperson, has a significantly higher IQ.
April, welcome to Authority in the Wild.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be on here with you. I'm a big fan, so now I get to fangirl in person.
That's exciting to hear, and thank you so much. Always happy to hear when someone goes from a listener to an actual guest. And I'm excited as well for the topic that we're going to discuss, because sales and negotiations in general are such a hard knock, I would say, for a lot of people. And first, what got you into this?
I've had a kind of a crazy career. I'm one of those people that just kind of like, when opportunities present themselves, I follow them. But it's about holiday time for us right now. And so I always think of this story. When I was a kid, I really wanted to earn some money for Christmas presents. And so my dad and I went and we knocked mistletoe down from the trees, and then I hot glue gun bows to them. And I went around the neighborhood and tried to sell them for like 50 cents a piece, and nobody bought them. I was so devastated. And then, so I went out the next day. I think tenacity and gumption are like two of my best, worst qualities. I went out the next day and I knocked on a door, and this is like in the 80s, this woman opens the door, and I lean around and look in her house, and I was like, "You're decorating for the holidays. Are you having a party?" And then I just walked into her house, just walked in, sat down at her table, and started asking her questions about the party that she was having. And after a few minutes, I'm sure that she was just like, what is going on here? And I was like, it'd be amazing if you had a beautiful thing of mistletoe right above this doorway for your guests. And then I sold her 3 things of mistletoe at $5 a piece. So I made $15, and on mistletoe that I'd been trying to sell the day before for 50 cents. And then of course I just I went crazy with that. And I think that probably should have been my indication that I should be in sales. And instead I decided to go to nursing school. I don't even know. But when I left nursing, then I got into sales and found out that I'm really good at finding creative ways to connect with people. What I'm not good at is the really hard work of sales, like the SDRs who sit and make all of these calls all the time. That's not my thing. That's maybe the hardest job in sales, but I'm really good at making deep connections with people and then closing large enterprise deals. And within that, you also have to be really good at negotiation. And so you start to learn what are kind of the behavioral psychological buying profiles of people, what's important to them. And, that's how you end up connecting with them and making people raving fans, as you listen and you help try to get them what's important to them at the end of the day, and whether that's the service that you're selling or a great contract or whatever. And so I've just kind of landed in it.
You repeat a word a couple of times there, connecting. I really noticed that you just say this word a couple of times, and I know how important it is, but please tell those listening, why connecting is more important than anything else when it comes to sales?
Yeah, I think people want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want people who are coming to them to help make their life easier, better, to help them make more money, to help them get a promotion or accolades at work or support their team in different ways, whatever it is. And as a salesperson, a lot of times we get so focused on our quotas and activity, right? Like these KPI metrics of, oh, I reached out to this many people and I sent this many emails, that we sometimes forget that there's a person on the other end of there. But when we take a step back and we think about how would I want to be sold to? I don't want to be sold to like I'm just part of somebody meeting their quota. I want somebody to come to me and say, "Tell me everything that's going on and let me see if I can help you solve that." And if I can't, maybe I know somebody else who can. And when you do that, you create a moment between the two of you where you're going, we're helping one another to make each other's worlds better. That is a strong connection. And when you do that, you can't lose. Even if you don't get the business, you don't lose. You have people who believe that you truly care about them. And those are the people who will recommend you to other people, remember you when they go to other roles. But if you just show up as a pitch slapper, where you're like, let me just tell you all about my solution and then give rebuttals until I wear you down and you buy, you don't want to go through that process again. I don't want to go through that process with anybody. So I think there's this moment of saying, how do people want to solve their problems? And problems hurt. There's a reason why, like they're problems, they're uncomfortable. How can we make it more comfortable for them and help them feel supported? And that, I believe, is through creating strong connection.
Couldn't agree more, because on the opposite side, as you said, like it's so easy to quote unquote easy to push your thing, to pitch it, to like force them into buying. But if that feel forced both for you and them, won't lead anywhere. They won't feel comfortable working with you if you're, let's say, a consultant or a coach or whatever service you're providing or product. They'll end up like in a position in which, oh, I truly need that. Why did I get it in the first place? And rather to building that relationships, building that connection, and actually make them feel heard and understood. And then it's much more easier, not just to sell, but actually help. If not, just passing on to someone else or connecting with someone else. It's another underrated thing, because often anyone it's in business, it's a relationship building activity, not just like, oh, you have a problem, I have a solution, let's work together. You need to build some sort of connection in order to make it work.
I agree. There's also a moment where I think sometimes people equate becoming friends with or building a connection with the people who are buying from you as this like people buy from people they like. And if you can just kind of sell on good vibes. And that's also not what I mean, because there's a guy called Simon Sinek, and he talks about something called the challenge network. Now, I can't give the ideas that he has as eloquently as he does, but when I think about a challenge network, I think about surrounding yourself with people who give enough about your success that they will ask the hard questions and they'll dig in. And I think whenever you're working with a potential client, you need to have that feeling for them. So it's not just showing up and making them feel good all the time. Part of this is also saying, hey, you said this, and it's raising some questions for me because I've watched other people do this. Can I push back on that idea a little bit? Or can I give you maybe a more difficult pill to swallow about this, but I think it will have a better outcome, and here's why. So when I say build a connection, I don't just mean warm and fuzzies, although that's what my sweater says, warm fuzzies. What I mean is creating a relationship that is strong enough for you to be able to build them up and encourage them and cheer them on and become friends with them. Many of my clients send me pictures of their kids and their grandkids or their puppies and jokes and all of those things. But a huge part of that is that they trust me enough to also come back with hard truths. And if you can't do that, then that's also not a true connection.
Speaking of true connections and this type of relationship in which clients become friends. So I was at some point in a situation in which the relationship got a bit too close and we're like two good friends and like sharing personal things, like you mentioned, and not just pictures, so on, but in the sense that almost like, I don't know, when you share even complaints from your personal life and stuff like that. And I felt like there was a moment in which the professional relationship broke because when someone knows you too deeply, let's say, can get a bit trickier. You find that to be the case or in the situation as well?
I think we have different levels of friendship that we can engage in with people. I have very, very close, precious friends who I don't do business things with, generally speaking. And then I have other levels of friendship. When I think about my friendship with my clients, for the most part, I am careful to give them the information that they need about our solution, our organization. I can talk about my life, those types of things, but I'm not going to call them and complain about my boss because there's a fundamental disconnect between like the trust that I'm having them build with our organization and the relationship that my boss and I might have because we disagree on a few things. If those things aren't pertinent to their experience, to our ability to, write checks with our mouth that we can cash for our clients, then they shouldn't probably be privy to that. So I think that that you can build a true connection without being while still having boundaries around what it is that's appropriate to share and what's not appropriate to share. That being said, if anybody's seen my LinkedIn, like I pretty much share everything. I have very few filters, but I do try to make sure that the boundaries are within what will make all of us feel comfortable and have a high level of trust in the relationship.
Because often it comes to that, right? To build trust. And we kind of live in a time in which trust is so hard to get. Not just because of AI that it's making it harder and harder to identify what's real and what's not, but as well because we are surrounded by a lot of quote unquote experts and quote unquote gurus that are just pushing things that we don't need. Speaking of building a relationship first and connection first, not just like, you need this, bro, and or that and that. And how you build that, like, apart from building a connection.
Yeah, I think there's a method to the madness, right? And so, one of the things that I'm very conscientious of whenever I start a relationship with a prospective client or when I'm starting a new kind of sales process with a current client is I look for opportunities to tell them no to something or to say, this maybe isn't the right fit for you if this, this, and this. And I think that that establishes a moment where they're like, oh, this person is maybe actively working to figure out what is best for me, maybe to the detriment of their sale. And and I don't manufacture those, right? But in every conversation that you have with someone, you should be looking out for all of the reasons why they shouldn't buy from you, right? Like that's because like either you need to address those and figure out, is this going to be a great client for us? Or it's an opportunity for you to say, hey, I don't think we're a great fit, but I have some ideas around some other ones. So I do very early on in the relationship use that opportunity to build a deeper level of trust and connection because most people think like a salesperson, we're just going to grin you, right? Like we just want our commission. Like, we have commission breath and we like you don't really want to be around us if you smell that. And so if you can say like, oh, you're more than a commission number to me, I actually care about the outcome for you. And within that, I'm going to raise a flag here and say, maybe this doesn't work if these things are true with your organization. Let's explore them a little bit more. So that's something that I think I just naturally do. But what I found is it fast tracks that level of trust for these relationships.
I love that because while it might come natural to you, a lot of people avoid doing that because they are afraid to hear maybe the no and oops, I won't close this deal. But the reality is that we need to hear the no. We need to hear objection. We need to have that transparency when we cannot help, especially. And because often we think like, oh, but I can help everyone. Not really, right? Not really. And that's the secret of a successful salesperson or business, to realize the moment that you cannot help, because that will lead to those that truly can help and build long relationship with them and make it work for everyone, not just for you and for your commission.
Right. And if you ignore those things, you end up with clients who have a subpar experience. I think you want to create zealots around what you do. Every client who you bring in, and I know this isn't always possible for every organization and for every salesperson, but I think it's something to strive for, which is every time you sell a deal, it's because you are the right solution to help solve whatever problem that they have. And I think sometimes we bring on clients who we can close, but maybe we shouldn't close. And there's a difference there. And I think the difference in outcome of experience is really important.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'd like to dive a bit deeper into the skills needed to not just identify those you can help best, but as well, once you do, how you close them through those relationship building tactics that you mentioned.
Yeah. I'm very curious. I'm curious like a 5-year-old in kindergarten is curious. And I spend a lot of the first few calls that I have with potential clients asking a ton of questions. And two things have to happen there. First is you need to realize that when you're talking to a client, they have questions of their own, and maybe they can't pay attention to what you're doing, or maybe they feel like you're giving them an inquisition with no real purpose. And so there are a few things that I think are important to say up front. I typically say, listen, I'm going to tell you just a smidge about what we do so that you have ideas, like so that you're not just thinking about the questions you want to ask. Then I have a ton of questions for you. And so I'll say, this is what it's like to work with us. Here's our price point. So that they're not thinking about that as I'm asking questions like, oh my God, I'll never be able to afford this or whatever. And then I say, okay, tell me about what's going on in your world. And I actually keep a list of 100 questions on my computer, and it's just called Ask More of These. And a lot of the questions start with things like, help me understand what this means for you, help me understand who is involved in this and what the stakes are internally. What have you done in the past? Did it work? Did it not? What happened when it didn't work? What was the fallout? What are the blockers internally for getting this done? There are a ton of questions that you can ask in a way that's conversational. Like you don't have to be like, question number 1, what is the fallout if you don't do this? But you can be like, hey, so it sounds like you've tried to address this in the past. How did that work out? And when they're like, oh, it was a total disaster, you're just like, that sounds awful. Spill it. Like, spill the tea. I want to know what happened. Who all was involved? What was the cost? Because that must have been really expensive to try this and then not have it work. Also, because your last solution didn't work, was that somebody else who headed that up? Or was it something that you did and an initiative that you spearheaded? And if it was an initiative that you spearheaded and it didn't work, does that mean that there are more hurdles that we need to overcome? How can I help support you with that? Does that mean I need to get on with your finance person or your procurement person and build the ROI with them to give you credibility? You can ask so many deep questions, but by the time you get to, the end of say 2 kind of 30-minute calls with the people who are involved, you know a lot about what's going on. Also, not as evidenced by how much I run my mouth, there's a statistic that says that people who allow the person on the other side to speak 80% of the time, the people who are speaking think that the person who is not speaking, who should be the salesperson, has a significantly higher IQ than if the salesperson were to talk more. So like ask questions and then shut up and listen. Let people talk. At the end of it, they're going to be like, "Oh my God, that is the smartest salesperson I've ever been on a call with." And you're like, I asked 5 questions. Like that's it. Um, so at some point, if you ask enough questions, then you have the information that you need to build an appropriate business case. across the organization with, because sometimes the business case is different for different people, especially with really large deals. And then it kind of closes itself, right? Like there's at some point they're like, they've convinced themselves that what you do, what you bring to the table is the right solution for you. And they start asking, how do we implement this? How do we get you all in here to do this on a much deeper level? So that's at least what works for me, is just asking questions like a kindergartner.
And there is a particular question you can ask all the time, or it depends.
I would say one of the major questions that I ask is, I'll just say, what I found, and this is like at the very start of the process, what I found is if you tell me what's going on with you, it helps me ask better questions and talk to you in a more targeted way about how we build solutions, because otherwise I could just talk about this all day. Like I can just vomit my brain onto you, but a lot of it might not be pertinent. So you tell me what's going on, and then I'll ask you questions around that. And usually I get a ton of information in that first kind of brain dump that they do. And that's what drives the questions that I ask after that.
It's because they open up basically, and they open up, and when they open up, they share the information you need in order to prepare the next following up questions. And I love how you proceed with this, like almost like an interview style in which you guide your questions based on what they share at the beginning. And I think that's valuable because often if we came to the meeting with a set of questions that we must ask, it's not going to work, right? Because often they might not have the problems that we assume, or the problem they assume they have might not be the real one. And we discover that until we actually dive deep into the topic. And what do you say to those that are strictly guided by, let's say, a structure they have for the sales call, or what the example that I just gave, when they have a set of questions that they always ask only those questions?
Yeah, like the disco dance party. Like if you're running a disco and you ask the same 20 questions, listen, that becomes a numbers game, right? You get enough at bats and you ask the same questions over and over again, you will statistically close a certain number of those deals. Full stop. Like, and that's fine. That works for some people. For me, it goes back to what we talked about just a few minutes ago, which is, how do I want to be sold to? What I don't want is for someone to roll up and ask me 20 questions that I know that they're asking every other person. That's not curiosity. That's checking a box. There's a difference between being genuinely curious about what is going on with people and having a set of questions that you need to build an ROI business case. That's not curiosity, that's process. So I think it works in numbers. There's a reason why so many people do it. It's not something that works for me. And if you ever feel like I don't want to sound like a slimy salesperson, then you can't show up with some rote list of things that might not be pertinent to the person, or that they might have answered already, and then you're like, "Oh, well, you did say about this thing, so let me type that down in this little column," right? Like that just doesn't feel good. And if you think that it feels good as a salesperson, I invite you to have someone else try to sell you something like that, because at the end of it, you're not going to feel good. You're going to be like, "Just leave me the alone," right? Like, and how do you do a rebuttal against that? I don't know. Like, I think I've been single for a long time, and I recently learned about this concept of giving somebody the ick. Have you heard of this?
No?
Where it's in the dating world, it's kind of like you go, "Oh, he made a funny sound whenever he ate and it gave me the ick and I just can't get past it." And I think that we do this in the sales process, where if we are just checking boxes, then we give people the ick, and there's just no way to get over that with them. So don't give people the ick.
Yeah, that's the case, right? Like, I remember I started one of my first jobs were in sales. I was working in a call center, and I end up in a position in which I hate what I do. Why I learned a lot. I was like, what I'm doing here, I'm forcing people to buy things they don't need, basically. And I'm like, I need to change this approach and in the same time, the job itself. But unfortunately, that's the reputation sales gets, right? A lot of sales happens like that. It's forced, it's not natural, it's not leveraging human connection. And I like the fact that you paint a different picture to this space. And I love those listening or watching to understand then it's more to sales than this. Like, for example, there are so many things I'm sure you apply in order to not just build those connections, but to understand what they are saying. Do you have any tricks that you use? Like, for example, the way you take notes, you record the conversation, or how you proceed in order to make sure you don't miss important aspects in the conversation?
I used to take notes. I'm very ADHD. I mean, it's a little rough. And when I started taking notes, what I found was if my hands were on my computer, I would end up like opening another tab and, oh, here, check my email and what's the next call that I have. So for me, it does not work to have a Zoom meeting open and then notes and be taking them. I currently use a program called Clap. CLAAP. There are a lot of like teenage jokes that you can make about this that I do on a regular basis. HR hates me. But I use Clap, I record it, and then I've spent a lot of time training Claude to understand what's important to me in the conversations. And so where I might take notes, I'll take a handwritten thing where I'll jot down something that I think is very, very important. But as soon as the call is over, I get the transcript from Clap, I put it into Claude, I put it in there, and I do a couple of things. First, I have it ask me questions about what's going on with this client, why they reached out to us, all of those things so that it gets smarter about this particular sales process. Then I also have it highlight where I might have missed some opportunities to get good information. That allows me to write a much better follow-up email to them where I can say, oh, hey, in retrospect, I didn't ask you this and I think it might be important. And so that keeps the conversation going. I'm not just going, oh, here's the follow-up stuff and I'll hear from you when I hear from you, right? Like I think that maybe we need to take our fate into our own hands a little bit more when it comes to sales. So I'll ask, what did I miss? I also have it do what did I promise? Because I do have ADHD, so a lot of times I'll be like, "Oh yeah, I'll send you that," and then like my brain clicks it off as have done it, and maybe I haven't. And then I use that in my follow-up. And then the other thing that I've started doing this year that I'm just in love with is I'm using a digital sales room. The one I use right now is Aligned, and I found it because I follow Gal on their CEO on LinkedIn, and his content is just always such fire, and I just love it. And so I decided to try a digital sales room, and it's great. As soon as I put everything into Claude and it's asked me the questions, I do the stuff. I create the aligned room for them. I do a custom video. So I just hit click. I have a rule on my LinkedIn, but also on Aligned first take. So even if I mess it up, it is what it is. Like you get it. And I'll just record and I'll say, thanks so much for your time today. Here are some of the things that we talked about. Here's the next steps. Here's what you can find in this digital sales room. We've set up things like a timeline so I can go in and say, oh, they want to sign their contract with AWS by this date. And when I put that date in, it populates all the steps that we need to go through in the sales process with dates in order to reach that goal. That way, if they have delays, I can like tag them in there and say, hey, has your goal to get this signed by this date changed? Because if it hasn't, here are the steps that we've gotten behind on, and here's my plan to help like speed this up. How else can I help make this happen for you? The aligned room has been an amazing tool for me. I try to use what I can at my disposal in order to be very, very highly present during the actual conversation.
I really love that approach since personalization usually make the closing the deal very easy. And isn't life easier that it used to be like with all these tools and AI and so on, and being able to follow with this personalized approach rather than just throwing there a follow-up email or something that most people might miss. Uh, but when you have this approach in which everyone is on the same page and using leveraging tools, it's such an amazing thing. And Speaking of tools, there is anything else that you usually use in the workflows that people might find helpful?
Well, I mean, I am a salesperson, which means that despite the fact that we have HubSpot as a CRM, I'm probably the worst person ever for updating it. I wish I used HubSpot better. I wish I used my CRM in a much more strategic way. So, anybody who has tips and tricks, or if you have tips and tricks in using it in a strategic way, I feel like I'm really missing the boat there. But then I have a very analog thing, which is I have amazing teammates, and both in like my consulting business and with Duckbill. And so I do a lot of talking things out live. Like I'll call whoever I think is going to work on a project and say, "Hey, can I run this through with you?" And just kind of brain dump to them, have them ask questions and give insights. Like, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a techie person. So, when we're working with very technical clients, I'm like, would this be important to you? Like, let me just like gut check me, right? And it goes back to that challenge network. I have people on my team who care enough about me and the business and our clients to say, hey, April, I think you're a little off base here. Or, hey, April, maybe you should dig into this, or pull me in to help dig into it if you feel uncomfortable or out of your depth. And so that's maybe my superpower is being able to leverage people and like not having any ego attached to it. I don't really care who needs to be involved to close a deal if it's the right solution for the client. And I think maybe as salespeople, we try to gatekeep, to use a business jargon term there. We try to like keep these things to ourselves, right? And like this is my sales process. I'm running it like this. I have the expertise to do this. I'm doing it on my timeline. Like I don't want other people to come in and mess up my process. And that for me is just doesn't work. And for some people who are like maybe way smarter and way more talented than I am, cool. I love that for you. But for me, I'm like, I'll take all the help I can get. I love money. I'm so coin operated. I'm like, put in the coins, right? And if that means that I pull in every single person from our organization to help, awesome. Like, cool. We all get paid for that.
Exactly. And you mentioned there's something that triggered me to ask a question like, how well you have to know the product that you're selling or the service that you're selling, and how much you need to truly believe in it.
The first question is hard. That's hard to answer because I think that if you're the type of person who will bring in other people and experts and leverage your team, you maybe don't need to know it as well as you think you do. You just need to know enough to be dangerous. You need to know what questions to ask and when to spot opportunity. A lot of the questions that I ask in a highly technical field are not about like how do you use your S3 storage, right? I don't care. I have zero idea what that even means, right? Are you using Graviton? What what does that mean? What I'm asking are questions like, how does this impact you? How does this impact the organization? What's important? Like, are you all, I asked somebody the other day and it stopped him in his tracks in a sales call. He was like, nobody's ever said this. And I said, what we find is that in cost optimization from a cloud perspective, we find that on one end of the spectrum, there are people who just want to get a contract with Amazon, with AWS, and they don't really care what the terms are. They just want the best that they can do very quickly. On the other side of the spectrum, there are people who want every single possible discount and credit and like commercial advantage that they can get, and they're willing to put in the time to get that because it's important to them or their shareholders. Where do you fall on that spectrum? And he was like, whoa, I need to stop and think about that. And I need to think about what our leadership would say versus what my engineering team or what my finance team might say. And it led to an amazing conversation. That has nothing to do with knowing my product. That has everything to do with understanding how people buy. And I think that if you kind of take a step back and you can say, what are the psychological buying behaviors and start to build your questions around that, you maybe don't have to have the same level of expertise.
Which are those?
If you ask the right questions, you can figure out what's important to everyone. So I'll tell you this, like what's important to the shareholders is different than what's important to the CEO. Maybe not vastly different, but somewhat different. What's important to the CEO is probably vastly different than what's important to, the engineer who's tasked with launching a new app by the end of the year. Those things are very, very different, but you have to get buy-in, at least in my role, with all of the people across the spectrum. And so you have to figure out what's important to them. And those buying behaviors, you start to figure out what they are by asking those questions. Like, do you have a procurement person who desperately just needs you to give them a discount, any discount at all, because they need to be able to go to their boss and say, I got a 5% discount on this. Okay, how do we work this out? I don't give discounts. It's not a thing I do. But I understand that you need this for your own personal success metrics in your role. How can we figure this out? What can I get from you that's valuable in exchange for that? And let's work together. So it's different for everyone, but I think it's, a lot of it is like, where do they want to go with their career? What's important to them? Where do they want to go personally? What's important to them? What do they need to tell their boss, whoever that is, right? Shareholders, like CEOs are their bosses are shareholders. Like that's just the way it works. And one of the things that we know is like happy customers or happy employees make happy customers, right? Happy customers make happy shareholders. And if the shareholders are smart, then they'll do things to make the employees happier, right? To like make them more satisfied. And it just goes around in a circle. And so if you can figure out how to insert yourself into that circle to make at least one of those groups happier, then you're in that wheel of success for everyone. And that I think is just the psychological thing, right? Is like, how do we make people happy?
All boils down on how we started, right? With connecting and understanding human behavior, understanding psychology, and how they eventually make decisions. And often this is overlooked because we think that, oh, if you promise a certain solution or if you promise something amazing they will get, they'll like just be all in and so on. But that's not why they buy in the first place. They maybe want to solve something much more deeper than, I don't know, increasing their revenue or whatever, or making more sales and such. And it even goes down to ego sometimes, because maybe, I don't know, growing a social media account for someone is not something that they think to do in order to increase the sales, but might be just I don't know, a vanity metric that they are chasing for their own personal.
Whatever it is, right?
Yeah,
I think what you said just triggered something in my brain, and now I've like lost it. So I have to follow my train of thought, which is I'll think of it at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'll text you and I'll be like, what it was.
that's it. Yeah. But what I want to ask you is to go on a bit on your role of a consultant. Like, I know that a lot of my audience are exactly that, are consultants, and usually they are dealing with either like solopreneurs or small businesses in which there are not a lot of stakeholders or a lot of people they have to go through. And they're sitting in this call, sales calls with one individual. And often that individual had literally no idea why they are there. They know they need to make more money, probably. They need to put more food on the table, need to have some sort of security in running their business. And if you are in that call, like apart from all these things that you mentioned, how you close that deal in a way that it's a win-win for everyone?
Yeah. You brought me to the point that I forgot. So glad that you asked that question. Oftentimes, when people reach out to someone, a vendor, and they say yes to taking a meeting, what they'll tell you is, I, what I need to do is save money, right? Like I need to cut costs. Cool story. I can cut your bill down to zero, right? I'll just cancel your Verizon. I'll just cancel your AWS, but that doesn't make anybody happy. It raises more problems. And so the questions that I think that we need to ask are not like is not really around, or like the business case that we need to build is not around saving money. The questions we need to ask around are more like, why is that important to you? What is it about this? Because sometimes saving money, especially for like consultancies and smaller businesses, is If I don't save money, I don't make payroll, or I don't pay my mortgage, or like my business goes under. That's what the problem you're actually trying to solve for is. It's not getting 10% off of a bill. It's not optimizing to save 5%. It's saving this person's business. And so when I have people who, like clients, especially with Duckbill, who call and say, "Oh, we need to cut 20% from our AWS bill," I'm like, "Cool story. I think that that's probably possible, and we can explore that. But why is that important? Who told you that you needed to do this? Is it your CIO? Is it your CFO who knows nothing about cloud engineering and like where these costs come from? Do they like, is it someone who has no idea that if you cut 10% the wrong way, that suddenly you can't deliver for your clients and you end up in the news and like your professional reputation is shot for a little bit and you lose clients because that's not good, right? So, how do I understand who's telling you to cut this cost? What's important to them? Why is it important to them? And it's the same thing with consultants. So, if you're talking to somebody and they say, "Oh, I need to add this to my tech stack." Cool. Why? "Oh, well, I want to record sales calls." Cool. Why? Like, what is the impact that that has? Is it because you have ADHD and like you can't listen to somebody and also type things and keep your mind there? Okay, awesome. What's happened in the past that's making you try to solve for this now? Did you lose an account because of it? How much was that account worth? What did that do to your professional reputation? How does that make you feel when you're going into a new sales call? There's so many questions that you can ask to figure out what's the underlying issue behind, "Oh, I just need something in my tech stack to record sales calls," or "I just need to cut 20%. And if you're asking those questions the right way and you get to the actual crux of the issue, then that's when I think it becomes very, very easy to close deals because you're not selling against other sales call recording technology. What you're selling against is literally nobody because nobody else is asking these questions. So maybe your solution is higher price than your competitors, but it doesn't matter because what you've done is you've sold them peace of mind. You've sold them success. You've sold them not losing customers again because they forgot to take good notes. And that's what closes deals, not, "Oh, I have this video thing and I can give you a 40% discount to get you on board today." Like, that's not how you keep customers.
Exactly. And often it boils down to that. But we are getting caught in this cost reduction chase. And as you mentioned, like it often doesn't serve us. By contrary, you might end up in the news and with your reputation destroyed. And then what? Right? Speaking of the news or online medium, where people can find you, April?
I am all over LinkedIn. It's easy. I'm April Palmer. Also, linkedin.com/in/, hot mess boss. That's all of my social media. So you can also find me on Instagram and Threads. There's not a huge difference between what I like, how I post on both of them. And I'm happy to connect with people across all the platforms. I live in Richmond, Virginia, but I travel a lot. I'm always kind of jet setting around the world, whether for work or because I love to surf. So, if I'm going somewhere, I usually post it on there. And if you're somewhere that I'm going to be, I love to meet up with people in real life. Sometimes when there are a lot of people in one space, I will host LinkedIn sleepovers, like slumber parties, and I'll get a big Airbnb and just invite a whole bunch of people and we play board games and like drink and gossip all night. And so, yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, but also I hope that people will find me IRL and we can actually meet. In fact, I'll be posting pretty soon about some travel plans that I have that are coming up. And this is evergreen because I'm always posting about travel plans that I have coming up. So yeah, so shoot me a note. If you do send me a note, please let me know that you saw me on Gabe's podcast so that I know to send him a note and be like, the coolest people. Because that makes me really happy to know how somebody has come across my profile and what shared connection we have.
Nice. And indeed, guys, make sure you do that. Make sure you do that. I would love to hear. And before we are wrapping up, I would like to ask you one question. There is any word or words that you never use in your sales calls?
Yes. I love this question. This is my favorite question I've ever been asked. I don't use the word honestly. And I don't use the word actually. The reason I don't use the word honestly is because in my mind, when somebody says, and honestly, this might not be the right solution for you, I'm like, oh, were you lying to me this whole time? How do I know what's a lie and what's honestly? Like, what's honest if you have to qualify it? It's my own pet peeve. It's a thing. But then when people say stuff like, oh, this was actually a great interview, I'm like, oh, did you doubt that it was going to be a great interview before? Like, no, are you surprised? Because maybe I'm not doing the right work ahead of time to make people know that it's going to be a great interview. And think about this, if you went to somebody's house for dinner and they like cooked you dinner and then they put it in front of you and you're like, oh, honestly, that was actually a great meal. They're like, did you think it was going to be horrible? And would you have lied to me if it wasn't? Like, I don't even know. So those are the two words that I don't use. How about you?
Actually, uh, honesty is one of them. And I learned this quite early in my sales journey. I think I tried to remember if there was I think there was a specific word that I avoid for so long, and then I start using and worked. Yeah, it was regarding the next steps. So I was avoiding using next steps for some, I don't know who told me, like, never use next steps because you will like downplay your authority and so on, because you assume there will be a next step. And I was like, truly?
Yeah, I think that's bullshit.
Exactly, because then I start using it and it
Hmm.
worked because people out of the blue, they consider myself someone that it's actually already committed to the process and it's not just there to try to sell something or to try to help, but it's actually there to help. And they're thinking already about the next steps. And then I start using it. But apart from that, almost everything is so automatic and so natural that I don't really think about it. And since I'm not involved in directly teaching how to sell or consulting how to sell, it's not like a second nature, like for you to know exactly, like, oh, these are the words that I'm using. But honestly, I'm trying to avoid as much as possible, even that my English is a second language. And sometimes I have like verbal tics that I use. Actually, unfortunately, I use quite a bit sometimes, not necessarily in sales calls, but in day to day talking. But this was a great reminder for me to be very careful what words I use because they use so much power.
Yeah, they really are. But listen, like the fact that you are English as a second language and you're parsing which words that you're using and being so strategic with it, I will say is more than a lot of native English speakers do. So I love this question. This is my favorite question I've ever been asked on a podcast ever.
So glad to hear, so glad to hear because I was always thinking about it and I never had the chance to ask it, and especially in a professional like a sales consultant, to make sure that it's coming from someone with authority rather than just some person online that it's like, oh, you should not use that on that. I'm like, are you sure?
Yeah. Yeah. Why? I do love next steps, though. I think that people are looking to understand what the path forward is. It's a great way to build transparency into the process where you can say, next steps are this. This is kind of the total journey. And then here's the next steps. And it gives people a path to follow. So I'm going to keep using that one. I think I love that you got the advice and then you were like, wait a second, this doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I'm glad that resonated with you. And I'm honored to hear that you learned something from me as well. So thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure. And I can't wait to keep following your journey on the podcast because it's one of my favorites. So
Thank you. Thank you so much, April. This was April Palmer on Authority in the Wild. Thank you so much for tuning in.